Hi, I'm Billy Stewart, Assistant Pastor here at Solid Rock Tabernacle, 1325 Rudy Road in Alma, Arkansas. On behalf of Senior Pastors Harold Lee and Debbie Gilmore and the entire congregation of Solid Rock Tabernacle, I would like to welcome you to the broadcast and extend this personal invitation to you to come be with us in one of our exciting spirit filled services. Our Sunday school begins at 9 a.m., morning worship is at 10 a.m., and Sunday evening worship is at 6 p.m. We also have an exciting Wednesday evening Bible study at 7 p.m., where we are taking a journey through the Bible, book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse. I think you'll enjoy it. Join us, won't you? 1325 Rudy Road in Alma. We're church the way it should be, and we'll save a seat for you. Now, let's join our service already in progress. Next week, we'll start getting into the spies going into the promised land. So they're just about to get to the promised land. This week, we're going to talk about they've got a little bit of argument going on, family bickering going on there. All the quail, yeah. Okay. Very good. Well, this week we're getting a little bit of sibling rivalry, I guess, on it. So let's get into it. Numbers chapter 12, verse number 1. And if I can get my. Okay. There we go. Okay. Wasn't wanting to work. All right. Now I'll bet we'll work. All right. And Miriam and Aaron spake against Moses because the Ethiopian woman whom he had married, for he had married an Ethiopian woman. Y'all remember who Miriam is? Huh? Miriam, Aaron's sister, yeah. And yeah, actual Ethiopian, yeah. Okay? Now, Miriam and Aaron, of course, were sister and brother of Moses. So, again, we're getting into a sibling rivalry going here. And their disapproval of Moses and his Ethiopian wife was an example of a principle that was later stated by Jesus, that it is not unusual for a prophet to find no honor among his own people. And you see that a lot even today with people. It's hard for somebody who was a wild child in school to go back to that city and become a pastor in that city, because everybody remembers how you were, before. And they like to bring it up to you, how you were. But this is, and Jesus said that a prophet is not, because if you remember when Jesus went back to Nazareth, they were like, aren't you in that of America? Sisters here with us, and yeah, what's this guy for Doritos, you know? And it's that same way, but people need to see beyond that, especially in today's time. I've had people. Assistant pastor at church. You're a pastor? I remember you. I remember you when you were in school, and I said, yeah, but look at me now, you know. you can see where God brought me from to where I am now. You know, don't look at the way I was then. All right, that's fine. If you want to look at the way I was then, look at the way I was then. But look at the transforming power of God today. You know, what has happened. So, because the woman was an Ethiopian, that was their reason for criticism. And because Ethiopians were, you know, they were looked down upon according to the Jews, but some regard this as a problem passage, though. Okay? Because Exodus 16 to 21 says the wife of Moses was named Zipporah. Y'all remember that? And not Ethiopia. Okay? So, what happened? Is the Bible wrong? No. Okay? Yeah. Okay, that's one theory. One theory. Some people think that, I'm sorry? Well, no, he didn't have more than one wife. He only had the one wife, but some think that Zipporah died at some point in time, and this was a second wife that Moses took after Zipporah's death. And now remember, Moses lived to be a very old man. He lived a remarkably long life. And at this point in time, while they're there, Moses is about 81 years old. Okay? Now imagine that, 81 years old, and he's traipsing across. You know, well, you know, nowadays we get up and we're 61 and we get up and complain about having to get out of bed and walk to the kitchen, you know. Because, you know, it's, and kids, I've told the other kids this, y'all listen to me. Don't ever eat Rice Krispie cereal. Okay? Because when you do, it settles in your bones, and when you get older, you hear it all the time, every time you get out. So, but at this time, Moses is more than 81 years old right now. And it is certainly possible that he outlived Zipporah, and he had more than one wife. And in fact, it's possible that he survived even more than one wife. But some think that Moses took a second wife in addition to Zipporah, kind of what Sister Jen said. Okay? This, something like that happened. But still others suggest that Jethro, Zipporah's father, was actually from Ethiopia. He was just living in Midian. Okay? Making Zipporah an Ethiopian by birth. Okay? But she was one who had lived in Midian, but she was actually from Ethiopia. Okay? Get past that. Huh?
What is the significance of that?
Of
All these
the differing opinions, because it doesn't say for sure what it is. So there's a lot of theories as to why it was, you know, and it's because basically the reason that they're coming up with these theories on why this is because it appears to contradict each other. Because they're saying, Miriam and Aaron are saying that Moses is married to an Ethiopian woman. But the Bible says that Jethro was from Midian, which would make his daughter from Midian as well. Okay? So that creates what appears to be a contradiction in the Bible. So since the Bible doesn't say, they have to go back and look at traditions, different things as to what it could possibly be. And these are just a few theories of how it actually could be. Huh? His mama could have been from Ethiopia. We don't know for sure what it was that caused it, but she was considered an Ethiopian. This wife is considered an Ethiopian. Okay? But it may also uh, it may also be possible that Ethiopian here was actually just a derogatory term used to criticize Zipporah, right? Because of her dark complexion. That's well, they were all dark, but there were some darker than others. Right? So, and Ethiopians were even more dark than most people. So, and it may have just been because she was a little bit darker skinned than somebody else that they use that as a derogatory term. Well, she's an Ethiopian. It's kind of like you see somebody who's hair and stuff like that. A lot of people say, "Well, what are they? Are they from Mexico, or where are they from?" It's not so much that they may be from those places. It's just that that's a way that people use to describe it. And in this case, being Ethiopian was a derogatory thing. They didn't like the Ethiopians. So, basically it's kind of like, it'd be, they were throwing shade on Zipporah, saying, she's, So, whatever it was, they criticized Moses and his wife for something that she had absolutely no control over, which was her appearance. She had no control. Was in fact Ethiopian, or she just had a dark complexion that is normally associated with the Ethiopians. Okay? But as the following verses are going to show, the complaint over Moses' wife was not the real issue. That's just the one that they used. And you see that a lot. People will complain about something else, but that's not really the issue. They'll complain about something when it's something else entirely that is the problem.
So use something that everybody else would think is like they use something that everybody else sees.
Yeah, they use kind of something somebody else, okay? But a lot of people are criticized for things that really aren't the real issue, okay? Or they're criticized about things that they really have no control over whatsoever. All right, verse number 2. And they said, hath the Lord indeed spoken only by Moses? Speaking to Moses here? No, he's speaking to us too. He's speaking through us as well. But the Lord hears what they're saying. So this question was basically meant to tear Moses down. It was asked with the assumption that Moses was spiritually proud. Okay? And it was kind of the idea that Moses was arrogantly presenting himself as the only spokesman of God to Israel. Right? Though it was presented in the form of a question, it was in fact an attack against the authority of Moses. Okay? And not only an attack against the authority of Moses, but it was an attack against the God who appointed Moses. Now, in one sense, the proper answer to this question was no. Right? The Lord only spoken through Moses. We see a lot of different times, okay? God spoke to the people through Aaron, Exodus 4:30. God spoke to and through Aaron in Exodus 12:1. Words that were inspired by God in Exodus 15:20 and 21. And on one other occasion, in some way, God spoke through the elders in Numbers 11, 24, and 25. Remember, we talked about that last week. Spirit, they began to prophesy. The Lord spoke through them as well. Right?
You're talking about those two men.
Well, it was, yeah, two of them that were outside, but they had all they called all the elders together to appoint. But yeah, but the answer to this question is yes. God had only spoken through Moses, because God appointed Moses as the foremost Israel at that time, and God used Moses and as his spokesman to Israel. Most of the time when God spoke to Israel, he spoke through Moses. Okay? And Aaron and Miriam kind of reason like this. We are spiritually gifted and God has spoken through us. Therefore, Moses should share his authority with us. Okay? They basically are thinking God's used us too. And since God has used us, then we should share in the authority that Moses has. Being used by God in themselves didn't justify receiving the responsibility, the authority of leading the people of God. Okay? Just because God speaks through somebody doesn't mean that he's put them in a position or made them in such a way that they are able to lead God's people. Okay? There are plenty of people that are out there that God speaks through. Okay? But he didn't put them in a position to be over God's people. There are a lot of evangelists out there that God speaks through. Okay? But God didn't put them in a position of authority over a church, like a pastor. Okay? They're evangelists, they speak, God speaks through them, but not in that position of authority over a church body. Okay? So God, just because you are doing something and God is using it, doesn't mean that it justifies you having the authority over the people of God. Okay? They said, hath he not spoken through us also? Now, in one sense, this was a stranger question than the first one. God had spoken to Miriam. That wasn't really a question, but an attempt to lift Miriam and Aaron up. Okay? They wanted some of the authority and some of the attention that Moses received by God, by God's appointment.
Were they jealous?
Yes. Basically, that's what it was. And by God's design, Moses had a singular position of leadership over Israel. Okay? The people of Israel weren't led by a Congress. They weren't led by a committee. Okay? Because it's hard to lead by committee. It's hard to lead. We look at it right now. It's hard to lead even with a Congress. Because nobody can get along with each other. Nobody can agree on anything. And the more people you have on a committee that is in leadership, the less you're going to get done because the less you can agree on things. Everybody's got their own idea of what they want to do.
They all want to go to one place, but they all want to take their own route.
Yeah. Everybody's want to go to the same place, but they all want to take their own cars. Nobody wants to ride together. Okay? Now, this type of leadership is seen quite often in the Bible, as a matter of fact. Right? It's shown in such leaders as Joshua, David, Daniel, James, Paul, Timothy, Titus. All of these were singular leaders of God's people. Okay? Paul did have a bunch of advisors around that was telling Paul what to. Neither did Joshua. After Joshua took over command, God was telling Joshua what. David, when he became king, God told David what to do, and David did it. Right? So all of these people were singular leaders of the people. Right? But the greatest type, or greatest example of this type of leadership was actually Jesus himself. We see that Jesus he had his disciples, yes. But we don't ever, Jesus says, guys, what do you think we ought to do? Eh? Yeah, I mean, nowhere does Jesus say, okay, guys, let's get together, let's huddle up here. What should we do? What do y'all think? Here's the problem. What do you think we should happen? No. Jesus said, this is what we're going to do, and they followed it. All right? So this is the leadership style that we are commanded to imitate. All right? Now here's the thing. It says, and the Lord heard it. Now, of course, God heard it. Always does. Anytime you say something, God's going to hear it. Eh? And he hears according to truth, not according to man's appearance. Miriam and Aaron accused Moses of pride, the very same sin that motivated them to make the accusation in the first place. Okay? God heard it, and God knew. You're accusing them. Usually, and we see this now, usually somebody that is accusing somebody of something is usually the one that's doing that thing. Okay? You see it a lot you see it in marriages many times where one or the other is accused of cheating on them or doing something like that, when in fact they're the ones actually doing it. But they try to justify it by saying, well, they're cheating on me, so. So usually when somebody is saying something that somebody's doing something else, it means you need to start looking at what they're doing, because that's probably what they're doing. Okay? It's probably the very thing that they're doing. And they were accusing, Miriam and Aaron were accusing Moses of being this prideful person, all right? That he thought he was just puffed up and all that, and not just, he's a bag of crunchy Cheetos, not nacho cheese flavored Doritos. Those are good, but Moses thought he was crunchy Cheetos, But it was actually them that had that pride. Okay? Now, Numbers 12:3. Now, the man Moses, above all the men, it's a very good reason. That's a very good question. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. Okay? Moses did, as a matter of fact, I was about to say, note that this is in parentheses. Moses did not have a significant problem with pride. Quite the contrary. Okay? His accusers were the one that had a pride problem, not him. If the genuinely humble man Moses was accused of pride and a dictatorial manner, it shows that accusations of pride and authoritarian manner are sometimes untrue. Okay? And in this case, the accusation was false, even though it was made by those who were close to the accused. Okay? Above all the men which were upon the face of the earth. That's saying that Moses was the humblest person in all the world. Okay? Now, who wrote the book of Numbers? Huh? Moses. Okay? So, if this statement was written by, it seems to be self-contradictory, right? Because he's writing about himself that I'm the most humblest person in the world, you know, which is boasting. Okay, that's no, that wasn't God speaking. That was what it was written there. Okay, so it doesn't seem to be proper for a very humble man to write of his great humility. True? Okay. And even though Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, because he wrote those first books of the Bible, and even though he did, it is likely that someone added this comment after the death of Moses, which the parentheses, okay? It was not the original that Moses wrote down. It was kind of slid in there, and that's why it's in parentheses. Yeah, somebody independently put it in. Somebody wrote it in there. It's kind of like when you see in the newspaper, you see something being described, or somebody has described something, and then what was said is kind of paraphrasing there, but it's not exactly what this person said. This is in the parentheses. It means that this wasn't what Moses wrote. Somebody added that in afterwards, after he died. All right? Who did it? Well, perhaps it was Joshua, because Joshua would have known Moses very, very well. Right? Huh? Somebody who had their own opinion. Yeah. But it's important to see Moses didn't start out as the humblest person on earth either. Okay? Moses wasn't always the humblest man on earth. He was a prince of Egypt. Remember? He was a prince of Egypt. He grew up proud and confident in his abilities. Okay? He killed people, okay? But it was only time, desert time, lowly time, that made him a humble man. Okay? Nothing humbles a person more than getting knocked off their high horse. Okay? When you get somebody that is just, they're way up there and they get knocked off of it, yeah, that it's like somebody that comes in and had a lady one time years ago when I was still in high school. I was working at a convenience store, and I just remember this for some reason. But this lady came in and she started griping, and she was going, "Well, I'm so and so, and I'm so and so. Don't you know who I am?" No, I had never heard of you before. And that just crushed her, because you've never heard of me? No, I never heard of you before. I don't have the slightest idea who you are. Okay? And don't care to know you after all of that. Yeah. But you get somebody that gets, that they think they're all that, and they get knocked off their high horse. When I was working as a police officer in Ozark, had a school board member, got elected to the school board. And he came up, and I pulled him over one time, and he says, "Do you know who I am?" And I said, "Yes, sir, you're so-and-so." I was reading his driver's license. And he said, "No, I'm on the school board, and I'm this, and I'm this, and I'm this." And I said, "Oh, really?" He goes, "Yeah." And I said, "Can I have your autograph right here at the bottom of this ticket, please?" Who cares? Knocked him off his high horse. Okay? But it was all this stuff, the time that he was in the desert, the times that he was low, that was what made him a humble man, able to be greatly used by God. Okay? Now, other commentators suggest that humble is better understood as low or miserable. All right? And this described a low point in Moses' life. All right, verses 4 and 5. And the Lord spake suddenly unto Moses and unto Aaron and unto Miriam, Come out ye thee unto the tabernacle of the congregation. And they three came out. And the Lord came down in the pillar of the cloud and stood in the door of the tabernacle and called Aaron and Miriam, and they both came forth. Oh, they're getting called on the carpet now. Daddy's about to have a talk with them. You know.
So you said the Lord did what?
The Lord called out to him. Yeah.
In the doorway.
Yeah, the Lord standing, the pillar of the cloud is in the doorway. Yeah. And he called Aaron and Miriam, and they both came forward. All right. It's like just wait till Daddy gets home. All right. So there was no long delay that was going on. Many of God's judgments are kind of long in. Okay? It takes a while for God to, build up and build up and build up before God finally says, okay, now I'm putting some judgment in here. I got to get your attention somehow. All right? This was not long. And those long delays, at least in a human perspective, they seem like they're a long delay. But on occasion, God brings his judgment suddenly, like he does here. And it seems that when God spoke at this particular time, it was in an audible voice. It wasn't through the Spirit. It wasn't through somebody else. This is God speaking. Can you imagine being Moses, Aaron, and Moses probably not so much because he's heard God speaking before, but Aaron and Miriam are going and God's saying, all right, get down here. Okay, yeah, we're coming. So God called all three of them to come before the tabernacle meeting. Perhaps Miriam and Aaron thought that God would use this particular to correct Moses. Proud and dictatorial. Eh? But God took a person involved in this. I was trying not to, but you can't. So Daddy's got to come in and we got to take care of this. Okay? And he wanted to make his will plainly known to them. So let's look at what that is. Verses 6 to 9. And he said, hear now my words. Now that's that's a way to start it. Hear now my words. This is, you better listen to me good. If there be a prophet among you, I, the Lord, will make myself unto him in a vision, and will speak unto him in a dream. Okay? What he's saying, if there's a prophet, I speak to prophets in visions, and I speak to them in dreams. He said, my servant Moses is not so, who is faithful in all mine house. With him I will speak mouth to mouth. Basically, face to face, I will speak to him. Even apparently, and not in dark speeches, and the similitude of the Lord shall he behold. Get my mouth working. Wherefore then ye not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? And the anger of the Lord was kindled against them, and he departed. Okay? And that's kind of laying it on the line there. Okay? So the basis of Miriam and Aaron's complaint was essentially, what's so special about Moses? Okay? What's so special about Moses? Why is he so much better than us? Yeah, I don't understand. Why you like him better than me? Yeah. Yeah. But God explains here what is so special about Moses. Yeah. As I said, most prophets, they reveal their revelation through a vision or a dream, however it is. They receive their revelation. God spoke to Moses face to face. Didn't get to see him. We'll look at that, what the face to face kind of means there. Yeah. Yeah. That we'll get what that means face to face on that. But God spoke in a manner of speaking, he spoke to him face to face. Now we understand the phrase face to face to mean a great and unhindered closeness in relationship. He spoke to him audibly, but it was a close relationship. And we don't mean that Moses literally saw a material or physical face of God. Okay? Yeah, because no man is able to look upon him. All right? It says that in Exodus, Exodus 15, I believe. Okay? This is also demonstrated by the phrase, the similitude of the Lord shall he behold. In other words, it is the likeness of God he shall behold. This is what Moses had actually seen of God with his physical eyes. Yeah, kind of like a shadow. You know, not the actual, not actual God's himself, but the similitude of God. Okay? The form of God. Okay? Nothing specific, nothing material, because, Exodus 38, I'm sorry, because he could not see the Lord and live. I think it first says it in Exodus 15, but again it says it repeats it in Exodus 33. Okay? This clarity of revelation Moses enjoyed remarkably close communion with God. And it's worth considering why. Okay? It was because God needed a man this close to him at that time. He needed somebody that was that close to him, that he could come down and he could talk face to face with. He needed that. Okay? Yeah. And he needed that to be a vessel of revelation. Speak to the people. Okay? And because of this, he was a proper leader for the nation through this remarkable time in Exodus. This close relationship was a gift. Okay? Definitely a gift. And it was a gift from the sovereign God to Moses. Another one, it was because humble. And only the humble, those who are genuinely other-centered, not self-centered, other-centered, can be trusted with such communion with God. Moses didn't go out and brag about his relationship with God. It was just the relationship that he had. But he always used that relationship with God for the people of Israel. Okay? To God was faithful in all of God's house. His walk of righteousness and purity demonstrated over 40 years in obscure service to God in the smallest things revealed the faithful heart that God saw in Moses. Now remember, they have not been wandering for 40 years. This is still only about a year after they've left Egypt. Okay? Now, as much as Miriam and Aaron didn't want to recognize it, Moses did have a unique calling and a unique equipping from God. They did not speak against Moses as the leader of Israel as much as they spoke against Moses, the servant of God. Okay? Now, it wasn't that Moses was beyond criticism. He wasn't. Moses was not to be simply obeyed and praised and that's it. Right? Never held accountable. Ask any difficult questions. It wasn't, this wasn't a cult that Moses was a leader of, that everybody just followed Moses blindly, okay? And, huh?
But he did, he was accountable.
He was accountable, yeah. Yeah, he was accountable. In fact, another relative of Moses, his father-in-law Jethro, did confront Moses. And he did ask Moses some difficult questions. And Jethro was greatly used of God when he did this. Okay? So, Miriam and Aaron should have been afraid to speak against Moses because their criticism was petty. Right? And about something that didn't matter or was beyond control. The nationality or appearance of Moses' wife was beyond her control. There was nothing she could do about it. And Miriam and Aaron should have been afraid to speak against. They got that again, okay? Because Moses, the criticism was not true. Moses was not a proud man, but the humblest man on earth. And Miriam and Aaron should have been afraid to speak against Moses because their criticism was prompted by their own self-interest. They were jealous. Basically, they were jealous of all the attention that Moses was receiving. And they wanted some of that attention for themselves. Leaders in the house of God must be held to account. All right? You shouldn't just blindly follow them. You must be held, they must be held to account. They must be open to criticism and questioning. Okay? But they don't need to make themselves quiet targets either for those who bring petty, false, and self-motivated criticism. Okay? Now, after making his anger evident, God that is, the remarkable presence parted. Now remember, the presence of God was the cloud. And basically, you've got Miriam, the cloud of God is at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. They're standing there. God chastises them, and then all of a sudden, shoo, he's gone. Okay? Now this obviously left an uncomfortable pause for Miriam and Aaron. Yeah. God chastises them, all of a sudden, he's gone, and they're going, okay, what's next? What's going to happen? Verse 10. Tabernacle. So Miriam, and she was leprous. Where the body rots and decays. It was basically considered a walking death. Okay? And Miriam had an advanced case of leprosy instantly. It didn't come slowly, it was instantly. And at this moment, God caused her body to reflect her heart. Now, it seems that Miriam didn't immediately know this. She didn't realize this was happening. Aaron did first. Okay? Yes. Leprosy causes you to turn white. Okay. All right, verses 11 and 12. And Aaron said unto Moses, Alas, my Lord, I beseech thee, lay not the sin upon us, wherein we have done foolishly, and wherein we have sinned. Let her not be as one dead, of whom the flesh hath consumed, which he cometh out of his mother's womb. Now, Aaron's one of those guys that's really easily influenced. Okay? He is. Think about it. When the people of Israel wanted an idol, he was persuaded to provide one for them. Okay? He was influenced by his sister. And now, he's very quickly influenced back to humble submission before Moses. Okay? Now, this phrase, done foolishly, the Hebrew word here is ya'al. And it is a rare term. It's used in Isaiah 19:13, Jeremiah 5:4, and Jeremiah 50:36. And it refers to a person who acts in a delusional manner. Okay? Usually as a result of ignorance, of one lacking knowledge or of God in his ways. Okay? Now here, Aaron calls Moses his master. Moses the power to strike Miriam with leprosy. He attributed that, he thinks Moses is the one that did this, okay? When it was God that did it, well, he knows that God did it, but he thinks God did it through Moses, all right? But Aaron also confessed his previous criticism. He said, I was foolish and I was sinful, all right? Now, sadly, we can't seem to separate Aaron's immediate and dramatic change of heart, which is what he has here. We can't separate this from the threat that he might be the next victim of God's judgment. He looks over and he sees Miriam, his sister, hit with leprosy, a bad case of leprosy, and then he immediately turns to Moses, I'm sorry, Moses, don't do this to me. So was he really sorry, or was he just afraid that he was going to be the next one? Eh? So his confession seemed to be full of just self-interest there. I don't want to be the next one to get struck down with this stuff. So I'm going to beg for forgiveness. Verse 13, and Moses cried unto the Lord, saying, Heal a leader, false, self-motivated, and you get that quite a bit. Often the right thing to do is to just ignore them. And just leave them up to God. Let God take care of them. And just keep busy what the Lord has called the leader to do. Okay? You get a lot of people you become the leader of some of God's people, there's a lot of people that are going to say a lot of things. It's got to be like water off a duck's back. You just got to say, okay. When Moses speak, now get this, when Moses did speak, this is the first time he's spoken. What did he do? It was in prayer for his accusers. He said, Lord, heal her now. It wasn't, hey, God, appreciate that. Got my back. Me and God were buds. Yeah. Yeah. Instead he said, Lord, heal her. Heal her body. Look what the Lord said, verses 14 to 16. And the Lord said unto Moses, if her father had but spit in her face, should she not be ashamed 7 days? Let her be shut out from the camp 7 days, and after that let her be received in again. And Miriam was shut out from the camp 7 days, and the people journeyed not till Miriam was brought in again. And afterward the people removed from Hazeroth and pitched in the wilderness of Paran. So God did indeed heal Miriam, just like Moses asked him to. Okay? If she was still a leper, she wouldn't have been allowed to remain in the camp. And she was received into the camp again. Yet God allowed her to live with the outward display of her inward heart for 7 days. Okay? Let everybody see what your heart's like for 7 days.
That's what it was, outward.
She knew that she had made a mistake, but I don't think it was, she related it to her outward appearance being a reflection of her inward heart. No. But God allowed this to happen for her to have that outward appearance of it for 7 days. And not only that, but he allowed the whole nation of Israel to know it as well. And this was appropriate because Miriam had done something even more shameful than her own father spitting in her face. It was even more shameful than that. She tried to bring down a leader of God's people with petty, false, and self-interested criticism. Now, after leaving Mount Sinai, Israel came to the staging ground for the invasion and the conquest of Canaan. They were on the threshold of the promised land. They're right on the edge of it. Okay? And God is inviting them to take the land by faith. Okay? Because he said, this is your promised land. So here they are. In about a year. Because they celebrated the second Passover, which was a year after they left. Now here, so it's a little bit more than a year. But they're here. And they're right on the edge. They're right on the border of the promised land. And next week we're going to see what happens. Okay. Questions, comments, concerns? Did anything happen to Aaron? No. He was afraid. No questions? All right.
Thank you for joining us today. We pray you were blessed by the broadcast. If you have a prayer request or questions about Solid Rock Tabernacle, please visit our website at www.solidrocktabernacle.org. That's www.solidrocktabernacle.org.